go ahead with the introduction, I think, so people, because Brent has to leave fairly soon, so.
Okay. Well, I just want to take a minute to introduce Brent here in that he is a former professional hockey player, a former professional rodeo cowboy. Well, actually, he's probably still a professional rodeo cowboy. He comes to us from the Tsuut'ina Nation, the neighbors Calgary. He played his minor hockey in that area, and of course through the city of Calgary, and went on to play in the WHL and professional hockey. I had the distinct pleasure of getting to meet Brent this year, as he and his wife have started a business off of their ranch in supporting us with team building, our school, groups in team building, as well as Indigenous education. And it was there where I first got to meet Brent and hear his story. It's one of diversity and inclusion and the importance of allyship and all of those pieces. I since then had the opportunity to have Brent work with my AA U18 team, and to which I accredit Brent's story with helping our team come together early on in the season and understanding the importance of accepting behavior. So I think that Brent's message is an important one. He's now involved in governance in his nation and is an extremely busy guy in helping bring on a $60+ million recreation facility, as well as many other things with their nation. So it's my privilege and pleasure to introduce Brent to the group.
Thank you, Jordan. Good morning to everybody. Hello to all my friends and hello to my new friends. I just want to, first of all, thank you, Wally, for the invite. And I really appreciate the conversation that we had yesterday. I guess right off the bat, I just want to let you know that I have about 50 minutes. I'm very privileged to be able to host the King of Nigeria today. So I have to do a presentation in about an hour and a half. So I have 50 minutes, but what I'll do is give you a summary. My name is Brent Dodging from the Tsuut'ina Nation, and we operate the DH branch diversity, and the whole mission about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it was to speak about my racial discrimination situations that I've had in hockey. This is something that I've never spoke about for about 22 years, but I finally found the courage to be able to talk about it. About 3 years ago, before the pandemic and during the pandemic, I used the time as the pandemic to have diversity summits. And what I did was invite people within the sporting community, Olympians, ex-hockey players, ex-NHLers, European, people of color, all walks of life. And we started talking about one thing was diversity. And so we come up with the presentation, and I'll give you a little glimpse of what we do. So I guess I'm from the Tsuut'ina Nation, Treaty 7 territory. There's 11 treaties in Canada, Treaty 1 through 11. But why it's so important to tell the history about where I come from is because we're the First Nation people of Canada. And long before Canada was here, the First Nation people were here. And when I talk about my presentation about diversity, I talk about the chiefs of Canada, in particular our chief, Chief Bullhead. Chief Bullhead signed a treaty in 1877. And along with that treaty, there's a lot of things that the chief signs with the government, certain issues that are dating way back. But the one thing that I was taught by the elders is that treaty brought diversity to Canada. And diversity started with, we all know the CN, the CP rail, there was a lot of immigration and migration. So the elders really emphasized that the chiefs signed an agreement to bring immigration, and all these beautiful cultures and races start coming to Canada. And now, if you look into the present day, there's a big melting pot of beautiful cultures that are playing in sports and hockey. One of the things that we talk about was Indian residential schools, because we believe that we must tell our First Nation history on what happened in the past, and it's telling the truth of what happened to the First Nation people. And it's just an understanding 139 residential schools across Canada and what their intent was. But also First Nation people are breaking the cycle, and that we're striving and we're thriving nowadays. But it's just an overview. And I really talk about the legacy of the elders of the First Nation people, that what they went through, and in particular my granny Katie. And throughout this presentation, I really emphasize the ranch, the DH Diversity Ranch, because we talk about how the ranch has been able to touch over 700 teachers, students, athletes, and be able to teach one-on-one, not through the computer, but it's really impact diversity that's I guess face-to-face, and that was really important. We also had pitched the diversity video through the late Larry Day and Holly Fortier. So when we start talking about diversity, it was very important to talk about the lived experiences of racism. And for an athlete that's been around, I've been around for a long time, it was so hard for me to talk about my lived racism experiences on camera and explain what really happened to me. And I consider them challenges, but it was important to put them on video so people could see the impacts on how it impacts people of color, so we were able to do that in a short video, and we play it throughout our presentation. And with the thanks of TELUS and some other sponsors, we're able to show these video and these impact discrimination or racism awareness videos, because video really tells the story of what we're going through. And we all know that throughout hockey, whether it's in the AHL, East Coast, and also in the NHL, players are starting to talk about their stories. Bridget Lacquette, Ethan Bear, HDA. So it's important that these stories are told so we can teach people, teach Canadians, and teach the world about some of the discrimination that's going on, but also give them tools on toolbox kits, tools on how to recognize it and how to overcome these barriers that we stand. So my story, everybody knows that I played hockey. Everybody knows that I had a cup of tea in the NHL. I got to play 2 exhibition games. But the real most rewarding thing that I'm able to do is give back to the WHL. The WHL, I guess you can say I pretty much just forced my way onto the diversity team. I called Ron Robinson. I called Greg Gardner. I was a real advocate to say, in order to end racism, we need to be able to make people aware. We need to be able to teach people about racism. What is it? I was very persistent, so I kept I kept calling him for 6 months. So I eventually got to work with Stacy Myers, and I'm part of the WHL diversity team. But I'm very proud to be able to put policies in place. Once the policies are in place, it was important to have representation from the minority communities. And the minority communities are the ones that suffer racism and have to go through this. But it was also important for us to be able to come up with a training plan to teach people about racism and what it really is and how it really happens in sports. One of the main things is giving the important teams or the audiences, the coaches, the refs, an opportunity to learn about what is reconciliation. And everybody has their own version of reconciliation, whether it's you're a coach, whether you're a GM, whether you're it doesn't matter, anybody in the industry, but I give my version of reconciliation is building relationships. And my version of building relationships, I had to go back to the Calgary Flames and Hitman, back to the old Hitman days, Brock. I had to build relationships again. I had to tell them, this is what we're doing. This is how we want to do it. It took us a while, but now we built relationships. And because that relationship with our First Nation and DH Ranch, we're able to provide services, diversity work for not only the Hitmen, but the Flames, but also join partnerships with the nation. Like I said, we got a $60 million facility. It's important for nation to learn about each other and to have economic impacts and to learn about our cultures, to learn about our language, to learn about some of the things we go through. So I think it's no secret that our nation has a partnership with the Calgary Hitmen. They played their season, 19 games in the 7 Chiefs Sportsplex. Out of that, we got the Dream Gap Tour. Out of that, we got the World Juniors. Conor Bedard was here for a couple weeks, but now we have the Calgary Flames training out of our facility. So everybody has their own version of reconciliation, and it's how much work do you want to put into it? And I really emphasize that awareness and education are the main thing. It's I always have this conversation with people of color, people of diversity. You can't end racism right now, but we can look at chipping away. And that's why I'm a grassroots level. At the grassroots level, I really look at just picking away. And the more we can teach, in Calgary, we have 15,000 hockey players registered. At the Alberta level, we have around 45,000 minor hockey players registered, and that's my focus, is to really get to the youth so we can create that culture and diversity awareness so they start speaking the same language, and giving them those tools so they can correct maybe some of the older people that are using some offside language that may not be correct. So that's my whole goal, is to do it at the grassroots level, because the kids nowadays, they call them a Gen Z generation. That's how they refer to themselves, and they're so open to change and diversity. If you look at what is diversity now in hockey, you have so many beautiful cultures playing at the NHL level, and they're speaking up. Ryan Reeves, Matt Dumba, Ethan Bear, Bridget Laquette at the Canadian level. Now she's a part of the NHL with the scouting system. But you have some really key components that happened in hockey that are key. Luke Prokop was one of the first NHL hockey players to come out as a gay hockey player, and that's really key. We must teach people about the openness, what you're going to see in the sporting world, but you're also going to see it in the business community, that people are diverse and they identify, and we have to recognize that identity. There's a lot of key factors, especially in Calgary. 70% of Calgarians are white and Caucasian. 30% are different minorities, whether they're Chinese, Spanish, these beautiful cultures that exist. 5% are First Nations. First Nation being Métis, Inuit, or Treaty, and many different First Nations in Calgary. So we have this huge melting pot that is in the sports industry that we're going to see, but not only the sports industry, we're going to see it in the business world. The one thing I really talk about and emphasize in my presentations is identity. everybody has an identity that we have to be able to respect, and that identity is so important. I guess it goes back to the challenges of what I went through as a hockey player. And I guess not even Brax knows about this, but it's taken me a long time to talk about my challenges. And back when I played in the BC Junior Hockey League, I'm only going to give you two examples. But back when I played hockey, I was threatened. I was called every name in the book. And when I was playing hockey in the BC Junior Hockey League, we got coincidental penalties, but there was fans that taunted me and threatened to kill me and come to the bench and threw beer on me and literally wanted to lynch me after the game. And the team tried to protect me, but they can only do so much. We even called 911 and called the cops, but they didn't do much either. So it was, you're being threatened for your life. A big group of Caucasian men that were threatening to kill me as a young hockey player, all over a game, when hockey is meant to be a sport for everyone. And at that time, I didn't get a lot of support because people were silent. And if we continue the silence, you're continuing a violent pattern in hockey. And it's unfortunate, but these are the realities that really happen to people like myself and people with different skin color. And fast forward 2 years when I played in the Calgary Hitmen, I suffered a lot of racism from a particular hockey team. And a team in the WHL was very trained on how to come at me with my race, and a lot of vulgar language would happen to me, and eventually turned into a line brawl. A line brawl eventually turned into a brawl in the stands at the Saddle Dome, 40 people fighting, but it was all over racial comments, and it was very, very, very disturbing for me. But at that time, the league did not know how to handle it in a way where they had policies. We were just forced to shake hands on it. But fast forward 20 years ago, I would have did things different, but it was very hard for a hockey player to handle because it was all racial discrimination. And I think out of that WHL learning experiences, we need to train the refs, because they're the first people that hear the content on the ice. We also need to train the coaching staff. We also need to coach the GMs, the billets, and we need to be able to put measures in place to be able to teach everybody before we can even think about ending racism or making it stop, because it's not going to stop. We need to be able to educate people through lived experiences. And it was hard for me to talk about those challenges, but those are the realities that really happened to me. Even in the business side, fast forward 20 years later, when I'm building a sports facility, over a $65 million sport facility just outside of Calgary, racial profiling still happens. And I give examples in my presentations of how it happens, but what to watch out for. It's also very important to understand that there's reverse racism. What reverse racism is when people of my culture or people of different cultures are racist towards their own cultures. And I give them examples in our presentations. And it's very important to understand that happens. And there was a turning point. And this turning point was when Willie O'Ree was inducted to the Hall of Fame. I was asked to speak at the Willie O'Ree event in Calgary, and there was 4 Black presenters, and I was the only First Nation presenter. I was able to speak about the truths of racism that I've went through, and it's something that just happens to almost every person of color in sports. But it was a realization that a lot of people didn't understand what we were going through. And it was an opportunity to learn about Willie and what Willie's been through. We all know Willie, we all know his story. And it was so beautiful that he could carry on all through his life to educate and make people aware of the discrimination that's going on, but giving them tools to become better people. And that really motivated me. And the real turning point was my wife's a professional barrel racer. She's top 10 in Canada right now, but she suffered a lot of racism at the professional barrel racing level at the CPRA. So I give the group an example of what happened, and that was the turning point when she was going to quit her profession because of racism. But I told my wife, I said, let's use these learning examples of what happened in racism and let's make people better. Let's tell the world our story so we can make people better. And since that time, it's been our mission to teach people through diversity and awareness through our ranch at DH Ranch, but also do public speaking at the grassroots level to talk about the real truths about racism and diversity. I guess I can also talk about some of the land acknowledgements that we do and why it's important.
Brent, I'm sorry. I have a question. What you're doing really is outstanding, but the heart of it, why you're doing it. And I'm going to share a story here and ask a question after. I went to Toronto and they had hired an assistant coach that was Aboriginal, and he had coached in the Alberta Junior Hockey League, and he got up to speak in front of a large group of players and coaches and managers in the association. He broke down crying while he was talking. In other words, he didn't have to speak anymore. We don't understand the pain. And I'm just going to ask you one question. Have you ever cried over that?
Yeah, Wally, since I was a kid, I was trained by my parents, my mentors, my agents, not to complain, not to say nothing, because if I'm the only kid in the Western Hockey League or the BC Junior League and I showed some weakness around diversity or racism, I was told it would make me a weaker person and they would use it against me to cut me or to not put me on the team. So I was trained not to say nothing. I was like a trained robot or with blinders on, not to say nothing. But now I think back of it, I was just suppressing my feelings and I should have spoke up. I should have said that wasn't right. But in hindsight, that's why I'm trying to make change now to make players better, because we all know every week, every month that goes by, an incident pops up in the Western League, the East Coast, at every level. And if it's happening at those levels, every day it's happening at the lower levels. Yeah, I pretty much I learned how to hide my feelings, but yeah, it was very tough sometimes. Being profiled, being different is a good thing to me, but when the majority of the hockey nation is not the same skin color as you, it can be different. So my big goal is to educate people. I've been on a mission to talk about building allies and how to be an ally and how important it is for allies to speak up. And I think it's important. We're now like 700 to 800 people that's gone through our diversity course. Through those teachings, they teach their friends, and their friends talk about it. So I feel that at least we're 3,000 to 5,000 people have been affected through our program, and we're also able to teach NHL players, AHL players, and WHL players, and that's really key because we need people to be allies of diversity. And the more we speak about diversity, it's a real uncomfortable conversation for some people. Um, it's important to understand some of the tools of diversity that are important. You have to be open-minded when you're looking into cultures or backgrounds, and identity is important. If we don't know how to talk to people of different skin colors, don't be afraid to ask in a good tone of what you don't mind me asking your culture, or how do you identify yourself? And most people will say, well, I'm First Nation. I prefer if you identify me as Native American or First Nation. A lot of times in the sports industry, people will just say, give you a name, and it's an uncomfortable conversation that some people don't want to have, but I think we have to have it. Yeah, so there's a whole list of things that we can go through, but it's uh, it's through a presentation, and but any other questions?
Anybody else got any questions on their mind? Tim Bothwell, please. Are you muted, Tim?
Yeah, I'm an old guy. Sorry. Brent, it's good to see you. We don't know each other, but I remember well watching you play with the Hitmen when I was coaching at U of C. And if anybody doesn't know, Brent was a hell of a player. He was a relentless player, and a player that everybody would want to have in his team. And it does not surprise me that seems to be coming through in what you're doing right now, Brent. I wholeheartedly applaud, of course, what you're doing and support what you're doing. I was just curious about what your training program actually looks like, sort of day to day with the WHL, and I assume with other leagues as well. I would hope with other leagues as well. What does the program look like? Do you do this sort of presentation, same presentation that you're sort of zipping through with us today to give us a taste? What does it look like day to day?
Yeah, in a short form to explain to you, so one of the first conversations with the WHL that we had to have was going through a whole story of what is diversity, what is racism, what is discrimination, and explain to their key stakeholders of what it is. And going through their policies was really key, walking through every single step of their policies, because as an organization, you want to be structured when it comes to policies. And that took us about 4 to 6 weeks. But on the education part, they have Stacy Meyer and myself working on I did the 2 years of research and lived experience through my whole life on diversity. But what the plan is, and we're on a handshake agreement right now, but we're looking at getting a finalized agreement, is a real walkthrough of a video content of myself narrating it, of diversity in Canada in sports, um, a snapshot of First Nations, the first people being here through a video form, Treaty 1 through 11, the Chiefs, but just really getting into some of the diversity agreements that were signed as Canadians or as First Nations to allow Canadians here, and then showing the migration of cultures, and then giving them a video snapshot for the youth to show sports in general, and then getting into some of the diversity in sports when hockey first started, some of the key moments of Fred Sakamoose and Willie O'Reilly being involved into hockey, and then morphing into the present days of hockey, like present days meaning what does diversity look like right now, and really given the opportunity to have the video content to be interactive. So you do a 3 to 5 minute presentation on diversity and then stop it, and then have a moderator, which would be a virtual moderator, would be myself and somebody else, like in a sports ambassador like Bridget, or even some hockey ambassadors like Matt Dumba or Ryan Reeves, and walking through what is diversity, and then stopping the video, and then having all the players in the room have their version of diversity, and they're writing it down, and then continuing the video about just kind of segueing into what is an ally, or what is allyship, and why is it important. And this section that we're getting into, we're going to be videoing like players that are non-Aboriginal, or that are not diverse, but they're white or Caucasian. I'll give you a good example of an NHL player that speaks diversity to the T is Eric Goodbranson. He grew up in a diverse community, but he knows the importance on speaking up when you have to speak up, also to be a leader, and also having influential people in the hockey world saying why it's important, that diversity, that we must understand the issues and speaking up. Like I plan on using some of the Calgary Hitmen staff and Calgary Flames staff on what they've been doing on diversity. So it's important that the white and Caucasian people see their own people talking about diversity and why it's important. But at the end of the day, just giving them tools all throughout the video presentations on the tools of diversity. And I've got 10 tools that I use in our presentation, and we'll just put those tools of diversity. But at the end, it's the key message. I use the key message of Jerome McGinley videos, and Jerome McGinley is my, I guess it goes back to when we played together with Jerome. He corrected me when I played with him in the Kamloops Blazers. I did something wrong, and I spit on a dasher board at the Riverside Coliseum, and he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "You don't do that here. You get a water bottle, you clean that up." And I said, "Yes, Mr. Ginla, I'm sorry." But after the game, he pulled me aside and corrected me. And he still corrected me, and he told me the reasons why he was correcting me. And I was very amazed by his leadership. And after that, he introduced me to all his friends and made me a part of the team. So Jerome has that integrity and that leadership. So we all have that integrity and our leadership in us. We just have to be able to stand up against racism, because sports is for everyone. So we use that in our presentations to give players tools to encourage them. And it's really the hockey ambassadors, the people of color, and the ambassadors that are going to tell a story, and we just narrate it. So it plans on being, kids nowadays have a real short attention span, so you can't make the video content too long. It just has to be 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, then open conversations, and end it around 35 to 40 minutes. Anything longer, they will not pay attention.
I'll just, that's terrific, Brent. I'll just follow up. I think I've told our group this story before, but it would be about 30 years ago. You'll remember Kimby Daniels played in the Western League, likely when you were younger. Probably was a role model of sorts to you. But when I was coaching in Medicine Hat in the early 90s, he got 7 goals on us one night. We were playing at home in Medicine Hat, scored 7 goals on us. And as much as that hurt me as a coach, what I was more disturbed and hurt by was the reaction of a group of fans behind the Swift Current bench. The verbal abuse he had to endure was really, really disturbing and uncomfortable. And I did go to the general manager at the time and request that we meet with the group. There were a group of maybe 20, 25 of them that regularly sat behind the bench. And, you know, they were all very nice people, all very sort of well-intentioned people, but the idea about education is so important. They didn't really understand the difference between, you know, verbally abusing somebody on a racial basis versus just basic hockey taunting of a visiting player. They didn't understand. And we did take the time to try to educate them. And I don't know how it went. We didn't have any other issues the 2 years I was there, but it just such a pervasive, such an important issue. And in so many cases, it's what people are taught when they're younger. It's what they know as people, and they just simply don't understand. And again, I really applaud your doggedness in pursuing this and having a real impact in this area.
Yeah, I guess this is a conversation I can be open about is Eric Goodbranson is a very good ally, and he calls me up and he wants to have open scrum conversations about diversity within the organizations like the Flames or the AHL, because it's important that we know when to draw the line. Chirping is a part of hockey. Chirping is a part of a mental edge that we all know that you know is key. But there's a side that's completely offside. That's racial or discrimination. That's completely offside. And he was very adamant to be able to give me insight as a NHL player. And when we talked to the Flames, that was some of our the way we went in and we talked to the Flames. It was important for Tkachuk to have that edge when he talks about chirping, but we had these open conversations about diversity, and it was so cool to be able to talk to these guys at that level. But we just emphasized that racial discrimination is completely offside and zero, and they were the ones that were telling me that. So these guys, it's like we learn more off the players and the younger generation. They could just continue to teach us. So it's important that the younger kids know that, so that culture is just created of a diverse culture. So we're talking about it. It's not silence anymore, because silence is violence, but let's educate everybody.
And are you working are you working across the board in the CHL, like with the OHL and the Q, and or you know, tier 2 level? Has your program gotten that extensive yet?
Well, currently I'm a council member for the Tsuut'ina Nation, and this will be my last term. I'm going to take my council hat off and concentrate on diversity. I'm real passionate about diversity. So we've had conversations with the CHL and also the OHL with Rico that runs their division. But I think what we're trying to do is just me at the grassroots level. I'm trying to be able to make partnerships so we can get it right. And once we hit to the CHL level and Hockey Canada, hopefully, we got a nice program to where it's developed and we have ambassadors. So once it hits to the national level, that it's not smooth sailing, but everybody's got input, and I've just been doing the legwork for years, and I'm so passionate about it. I want it to be able to hit not only hockey, but all sports.
Brent, Kerry Bracco's had his hand up a few times. Go ahead, Kerry.
Sorry,
Hey,
Brad.
Brent. How's it going, Brent?
Hey, bro.
How you doing? I just wanted to commend you on your efforts and the things that you're doing. I know that we go back quite a few years, and I've always watched from afar and all the things that you've done. But my one question I have is that when they talk into the trash talking and the rights and the wrongs of it, I'm starting to get to the level where I think that in youth hockey, we should, it's gotten out of control, Brent. And whether it's a little bit of the racial stuff they're trying to curb, but the overall development of young kids is really starting to be hindered because they're thinking that the trash talking is actually part of the game. And I wanted to get your viewpoints on, first of all, question number one, would you be interested in branching out into that level of age? And I'm talking specifically the Royals organization, which is right in your backyard, and I know you're a former Royal, into that area, like the U18, the U16, the U17 teams, because two things, I think trash talking has gotten out of control, and then the respect that kids could learn from people like yourself and what you've gone through, and actually get them involved in your program. Is there time to get that sort of set up? How would you go about that? I know Mr. Fenton got his team involved. I'd like to get like a whole organization involved in what you're talking about doing.
So I'm a stats guy, I'm a numbers guy, and facts. So I'll give you some facts that come from Hockey Calgary, which is Mr. Kabelka. Before the pandemic, we were at 14,500 kids in hockey. After the pandemic, we're at 13,500. So we lose 1,000 kids in minor hockey. Alberta, probably about the same numbers. But when you get into the depths of asking why are they quitting, yeah, some of it's pandemic related, but why it's quitting. We did a survey on TikTok. I know it's not the place but TikTok is a place to where we could be open. I have a friend his name is J. Roy Makokis. He's got like 250,000 followers. But when he went live and he talked about this issue on diversity in sports, and we asked, his whole group is diverse people. We asked them why they quit hockey or why they quit sports. And we did a survey. We thought 90% of it would have been financial, but it wasn't. 98% of why they quit sports or hockey was racial discrimination. And that was a real key thing for me to understand. So it goes back to what I talked about. It's education and awareness to the hockey players, to the peewee, to the, sorry, I can't say that anymore. U13, U16, and U17. It's really awareness and education, but it's coming up with a program that's able to be universal, to go to these age groups and to be able to teach them and have open conversations. So our plan is to develop it. Once we get partners, all the hockey players are willing to participate, the Dumbas, the Reeves, the Ethan Bears, the Bridget Laquettes. They're not going to listen to me. I can narrate it and help out, but it's the ambassadors, and it's also the allies like Connor McDavid's, the Johnny Goudreau's, that have to talk about why it's important to be an ally and stand up and speak up. I think that's the route that we need to go. And the plan is in organizations is to train ambassadors. People, it doesn't matter what skin color you are, as long as you understand the diversity, they can be talking the same program and same language that I'm talking, and they can narrate the kids or help out organizations. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but it can get there.
You got to demute yourself.
That's just my usual error. Anyway, expanding to the Royals is one thing. Getting the different leagues to do things is another. They're all very important. But Jordan, I'm glad you came on because, the trash talking, and it's Caucasian against Caucasian is ridiculous. It's 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 borderline um, just teaching bad behaviors. I don't see in the playoffs trash talking going on. You might see it during the year occasionally in the NHL, but Jordan, this issue needs to be addressed in elementary school. And I think that the educational piece is what it's all about, as Brent's alluding to, and he's targeting his network of influence. So I I think Gary might keep bugging you, Brent, about doing something there, and his motive isn't as much, you know, the racial part of it, but it's the trash talking, which
Well,
is
I think it's both. I think you have to, it comes. They're both the same, really.
yeah.
Racial is just unacceptable, but the other part is equally unacceptable.
See, my point, Gary, is that there aren't many Native kids now. I don't think there's one on the Royals team. And
No,
they probably quit playing before that, as Brent alluded. In other words, whatever occurred when they were in elementary school or starting minor hockey or trying to interact in our communities, they didn't feel confident enough and they felt put down. So, Mike Benelli, New York.
Well, I was just going to comment on that, Wally.
Okay.
I was just going to comment on absolutely, it's something that needs to start in elementary schools. But one of the interesting things that we find is that the youngest ages in elementary schools will play no matter what the color or creed with one another. That racism is a learned behavior, and looking for differences is a learned behavior. So that allyship piece is so important, and I count myself very fortunate, as I said at the start, to have got to know Brent over this past calendar year, and we took all of our 50 staff from my elementary school to Brent's ranch, and that experience was an amazing one in that it's on the Tsuut'ina Nation. And so just getting that experience of, I've been down here for 14 years and never set foot on the nation. And getting to hear Brent's story, his wife's story, and other members and elders of their community stories. And that's so important in learning from others' lived experiences. And so having all of our staff go through that piece with Brent, and that was key because we are a very diverse population where my school is. And one of the other pieces with it was that allyship, the importance of stepping up. And it comes back to that old adage of, when you know better, you have to do better. And we have to do better. We know what's right. You get to the talking about trash talking and those things in the game. Yes, those were acceptable parts of the game, but they should no longer be. And there are a lot of acceptable things in the hockey culture that are still accepted that shouldn't be, that we don't accept them anywhere else. Like, I use the example of, I coach U18 hockey. I don't swear on the bench. I don't swear in the dressing room. I don't swear around my players. Do I know how to swear? Absolutely. I grew up on a ranch that the F word could be used as a noun, a verb, an adverb, or an adjective at any moment in time. But that doesn't mean that it's appropriate. I wouldn't accept it in a classroom in my school. So why would I accept it on the bench or in a dressing room? So that goes back to where this all has to come back to as well, is leadership. And the leadership has to be willing to take these things on. And I'm so thankful that Brent is willing to share his voice to this so that we can take this on. And as far as the Royals organization or Girls Hockey Calgary or all the different associations in Calgary, we'd be foolish not to take advantage of Brent and the Dodging Horse Ranch and that piece. Like I was just count myself lucky that to be able to have Brent come and speak to our team after we practiced in that amazing Starlight Center on the nation, and we're fortunate to be able to pair the two together. But I walked out of there and with my team hearing them a little differently about that allyship piece, most importantly. And as I've said before, that if we want to see our game grow, we have to include underrepresented populations. We have to get them to be more involved in our game. And if one of them is just this piece on diversity and allyship, well, that's a really key foundational piece. And letting people know that they're in a safe and caring environment as part of the sport. Yes, you may want to take out your physical aggressions on the ice as a compete in fair competition, but we have to make sure that this sport is inclusive.
Thanks so much, Jordan. I'm going to edit out this portion for sure and include
And
it.
throw it out. Yes, I hear you.
Share it with people. Mike Benelli, you're sitting in the background in a different country, near the biggest city in the world. Okay, what's your thoughts, questions?
Yeah, so no, I love what you're doing, Brant. I think, I got involved actually, so before maybe 4 years ago, I had no idea about any First Nations like communities. Like, being here in New York City and the location in this area, obviously we work a lot with diversity, and I do a ton of work with ice hockey in Harlem and hockey in Newark and hockey in Norwalk, all these underserved, communities, and certainly diversity is always a discussion, and trying to get more kids into the game and keep them in the game, and not so much protect them, but educate, right? And I think that's a great. So in my first, actually, it's great that you're on the call, because I was actually just talking with we had done a big program up at Heisla Nation with Brian Trottier, and that's exactly what the program was. It was using hockey as an outreach tool to reach all these young kids in elementary school, and use hockey as the vehicle to then teach them and educate them about, what they're experiencing, how other people experience them, and all that kind of stuff. So I thought it was great. It was actually, for me, it was a really eye-opening experience to be a part of that with him, and the work that we did with him. And we're actually doing the same thing with Reggie Leach and Bridget as well. Those type of programs where we go out and reach out to the youth players through hockey, and then hopefully you can add that educational component in there, to your point, because the celebrities, the people that have the voice, that will be listened to, are front and center, and the kids can really interact with them. So I think it's great.
Brent, anything else to add or ask? And Sammy, I'm curious, you must have some thoughts rolling through your mind, but Brent, anything you want to comment on at this point?
Well, I just want to acknowledge I'm a hardcore Flames fan, live and die red with the Flames, but I want to acknowledge the Edmonton Oilers on the work that they've done. They've used allyship, building relationships with First Nations, and they've used their national stage to work with First Nations on land acknowledgements, using the former chief, Chief Willie, to at the beginning of every game. They've made it an impact all throughout their community, teach people about not only First Nations, but its diversity. And you could see it in their cup run of all these beautiful cultures that they're showing throughout their interviews and throughout their people. So you have to give credit to the Edmonton Oilers, because they're doing it right. All these organizations are stepping up, so it's pretty cool to see. Everybody's talking about it now, but it's important that we just continue to work together, because like big hockey guy, together everybody achieves more. It's not just me, it's not one guy, but it's how are we all going to make this sport of hockey better, and it's how we work together. And I'd just like to thank everybody for hearing me out. My website is dhranch44.com. Don't be afraid to drop us an email. Unfortunately, I have to go. We're hosting the King of Nigeria today, so he's been at our nation for 2 days. So I thank you very much.
Nobody's ever left our call saying they have to go host the King of Nigeria, so that's definitely worth it. But thank you so much, Brent. It was amazing.
We'll be in touch, Dodger.
All right, Brox, good seeing you guys. Mr. Benelli, I listened to some of your radio content. Sammy, I always watched you play hockey. Awesome. And Tim, you're an absolute legend in this area. Wally, thank you. To all the guys to hear me out, thank you. And ladies, I appreciate it. You guys have a good day.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take it, Brent. All right. Sammy, I just wanted to get your take, because the female side in this issue, relative to what you lived and experienced over time, can you speak to the presentation and from your point of view?
For sure. So I think, I mean, amazing presentation by Brent. That was incredible. I think living in a segment of hockey that is within the minority, and my husband being a sledge hockey player, even a bigger minority within the game, it certainly resonates. But what I loved was his talk on allyship, of how the lived experiences, just because you feel like you've had a tough time in the game it's not a compare and contrast. It's having that empathy and understanding that others have very difficult lived experiences within the game as well. And growing up in Winnipeg, where it was voted the most racist city in North America, it was an interesting upbringing, where the segregation in the city is very profound, in that I wouldn't have known that growing up. I wouldn't have known that it was that racist growing up, because I grew up Caucasian in a area where we had many Métis teachers. I went to a French school, and they often taught from a Métis perspective for us. So we had a little bit different experience, I think, than a lot of my white English colleagues. But despite that, they themselves growing up had to hide their books when they learned. And I mean, they just had these various backstories that were so appalling for such a time. My dad also grew up right by a residential school in Winnipeg, and had no idea it was a residential school till he was in his 60s, because he never saw kids outside. Didn't know any of that happened. And my dad, who was in his late 70s, everything was brushed under the carpet, as we all know now in Canada. I've since done a lot of work with Right to Play, going into the First Nations communities all around Ontario and Manitoba, and it's a segment of Right to Play that's called Promoting Life Skills Amongst Aboriginal Youth, and PLAY is the acronym. So it's been about a decade, and I've been so fortunate and privileged to have been to about 15 First Nations in and around Northern Ontario and Manitoba. And so what we started to do at my hockey school was provide hockey school free of charge for anybody that can get there. So no questions asked. You don't have to submit any forms or anything. You just have to get to Winnipeg and be able to house yourself there. So we've had people from as far away as Sanakuliak, which is way up in north of Baffin Island. A ton have come from Rankin Inlet, and then also to communities that I have visited. Well, I've visited those two, but also Attawapiskat and all the communities within James Bay have come to the hockey school. And I have Bridget Lequette and her sister Tara have been instructors for a long time. They now have their own lives and their own families, and we have the next generation. And some of those kids that have come from First Nations are now instructors. But I would say it's still a struggle. It's still a struggle at the hockey school to unite the various different cultures and to create some understanding within the city is not always easy. And I try to have a diverse population of instructors and really go out of my way to try to create that. But it's hard in hockey to find role models and mentors willing to give back when, like you said, lots quit along the way. One of my favorite memories was one of the girls from Attawapiskat when she asked to be an instructor and came into my camp at Kenora to be an instructor for the next generation, which was incredible to see. But the one thing I think we struggle still with at the school, which is right in the city of Winnipeg, is the difference in expectation within cultures and the struggle that I think kids, like Jordan said, not my youngest kids, but sort of my middle kids that start to see different things, and why are some allowed to do certain things and others are not allowed to do other things. I mean, sometimes kids come from First Nations and they're sharing one set of equipment amongst 3 girls. So, they might sit in the dressing room on their phone when the other kid's on the ice, and why is that kid allowed to be on the phone? And, trying to get an understanding of what it's like living on the community and really having that open dialogue. And, the one thing I wanted to ask Brent was, are we doing this the right way? What can be done more? And how do I, as a white woman, encourage that conversation within my community? So, not necessarily a question for this group, but questions for Brent and for others. And that I rely a lot on the parents that I bring to and asking questions and making sure that they know that I don't think I know everything, that I want their lived experience to be shared as well. So anyways, those are my comments. I think having somebody like Brent is so impactful and so important. I mean, we are all white on this conversation. And I think it's important for us to have the conversation, but also to listen to people like him that have those lived experiences that are not what we went through, and to really, feel the weight and the impact and the emotion, like you said, Wally, of what it's like to go through that. So thank you for letting me stand on my soapbox. I don't know that I said anything more or less, but adding to the conversation.
Excellent. Tim Bothwell?
I just want to add there, Sammy, I mean, obviously, one thing we can all do, as Brent suggested, and as Jordan, as he always does, eloquently pointed out, be good leaders in our own respective communities. I think deeply that what Brent's doing is the best way, because it does, like a lot of these really difficult political conversations, they need to include sort of tolerance and understanding of the other side, even when we deeply feel that the other side is on the wrong side. So I really get that sense from his presentation that that's front and center. He's coming at it from a let's understand each other point of view, and not I'm right, you're wrong point of view. And so as leaders, it behooves all of us to, number one, as Brent said, name it and speak out when you see it in a tolerant, understanding way, and just don't accept it. Because I really do believe sort of the one-on-one, and he's a little bit beyond one-on-one, but that's what it amounts to when you do presentations in person. It's a personal connection, and I think that is the right way, and it might be the only way to actually reach people. And so that's one thing as coaches and leaders in our own respective communities that we can all do, is to have it front and center, that it's not acceptable, the racist, whether it's comments or whatever it is.
The one thing that I'm not sure if it was Bridget and Tara indicated to me, but I used to say that if you live in a First Nation community, you can come to the school for free. And someone said to me that isn't the right language to use. You're putting one above the other, implying certain things about certain communities. And so now the way that I word it is anybody, you don't have to live in a community, anybody can pay whatever they like. And so whatever you feel like your family can afford, and then, you know, most people do pay something, whether it's $50 or something. But still no questions asked. So whatever you feel like your family and that child can afford, then they can come and participate. So I think just changing some of that language too, for me, you know, I think I'm doing something really great, but the reality is that is from a racist bias lens that I have. So understanding our own biases sometimes too is hard terms to come to terms with.
Yeah, that's really awesome, Sammy. Applaud you for that. I just sent everybody but Brack. I realized I don't have your email, but I just sent everybody.
You don't have my email.
Yeah, I don't have your email. It probably must be
all those years of fundraising. Holy smokes!
No, I just sent everybody an article from Saturday's Globe that really struck me, and it was on this topic. It's called. It was at the bottom of the opinion section. It's called "Am I Métis Enough?"
Mm.
And it's a terrific article. I think really well balanced and presented. This woman speaking about her great grandmother's inspirational actions that spurred Louis Riel to start the rebellion in 1870. It's quite a good article, worth a read on this topic, and so I just thought I'd point that out to everybody. So, Brack, what's your email?
Carrie@brackobrothers.com.
Okay.
I'd love to see that. It's interesting. It's with great pride that, you know, listening to Brent, because you know, it was roughly about 30 years ago that I had the privilege of kind of recruiting him to come back to Calgary to play for the Hitmen. I was the general manager of the Hitmen at the time, and I had heard through a friend, Mario Amatillo, actually, what a quality kid he was, and that he'd had kind of a rough time at age 16, 17, and 18. And he was a slender kid, and he'd had some of the situations that happened out at and when he played in Vernon. And I found him. He was actually down in the United States trying a tier 2 level down there, and talked him into coming back. And it's been such a privilege, because he came in and he really, what the reason he came back was, he said, all I want is an opportunity, and a proper opportunity. And we were in a situation, and we provided that, and he played 2 great years with the Hitmen. I was there in the situation with some of the taunting that went on with the racial stuff, and it wasn't good by any means, and very unacceptable. And, you know, I think the guys that were on his team, you know, they stood up, but it just wasn't right. And so I applaud what Brent's done. I've watched him become a counselor, and you know, he talks the talk. Like, he is out there doing a lot of this sort of stuff. So I think the more that the diversity can get out there, obviously through whatever realms, and there's the discriminative part of it, but I also think that you know, that could be how you treat people in general, whether you're an athlete or not.